of thousands of people attend Tony Robbins events every year, but there's an event that only takes place once a year in the States, where 2,500 people from all over the world come to Florida to experience one of his most intimate and intensive programs, Date with Destiny. It's 6 days of total immersion, and the people who go through this don't just discover who they are, what drives them, and their ultimate purpose in life. They dive deep into how they interact with others and discover new things about their relationships. Yeah, this is the place where you deal with the hard stuff. And with thousands of people in a room, digging into their pasts, envisioning their future, you name it, you can imagine how emotionally charged the room gets and how personal of an experience Date with Destiny is. So it's not hard to understand why Tony never allowed cameras in to document the event. That all changed when he met acclaimed documentary filmmaker Joe Berlinger. Tony and Joe were first introduced to each other by two other heavy hitters in the entertainment industry, Brian Koppelman and David Levien, who themselves had attended Date with Destiny and ultimately went on to executive produce the documentary. Now, you might be wondering why Joe would have pursued a subject like Date with Destiny in the first place. You might be especially curious as to why he felt so strongly about it that he pressed Tony for years to agree to it. After all, Berlinger is known for investigative films like the Paradise Lost trilogy about the West Memphis Three, which exposes cracks in the criminal justice system, and Crude, which is about pollution in the Amazon from giant oil companies. His work, for the most part, has been geared toward taking us into the issues of the world that are often obscured by media or politics and uncovering disturbing truths. So for this film, it's a bit of a departure in subject. The motivation, the storytelling, the deep dive into parts unknown, that's all there. And that's what made the endeavor a clear choice for Joe. The film is called Tony Robbins, I Am Not Your Guru, and it premiered at South by Southwest in March, followed by a string of showings at film festivals. The documentary was picked up by Netflix, and it will premiere to members worldwide on July 15th. Here to talk with us today about the making of the documentary is Joe Berlinger. Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course, glad to be here.
So I'd love to start actually with some personal history, so we can understand how you got to where you are today. What was your path to becoming a filmmaker?
Oh, I had the most circuitous route to becoming a filmmaker. It was not what I was planning. I was actually a language major in college and fluent in German as a result of that. My focus was on German and I spoke French, but really I was quite proficient. And my only goal in college was to figure out how to live in Europe, get paid to speak languages, and that was the goal. So somehow I bluffed my way into a job at a huge international advertising agency, Ogilvy and Mather,
Oh, wow.
which is based in New York.
Yeah.
But they had a Frankfurt office, and they were looking for a young American to go kind of be a client service person to coordinate the activities of American clients advertising in Europe. Basically, I was kind of like this glorified account executive. People, when I tell them that and see what I've done since, have a hard time wrapping their heads around that. But really, I was not interested in anything other than finding a way to, live overseas and speak German. It got me into the media business, and my first time on any film set was on a TV commercial shoot in Germany, and that's when the light bulb went off. So I'm 22 at this point. I had gone to Colgate University again as a language major, but when I was in Germany, I'm on a TV commercial set for the first time, and that's when the lights, camera, action kind of caught my attention, and I realized, oh, this part of the business is really interesting. So I spent a couple of years in Germany, trying to figure out how to get to that side of the business. Eventually went back to New York with Ogilvy as a producer on American Express commercials. We then hired the Maisel brothers, who are the seminal, 1960s cinema verite kind of godfathers. They did films like Salesman, Grey Gardens, Gimme Shelter. And when I was, working at Ogilvy, we hired these guys to shoot some unscripted television commercials. And I kind of hit it off with one of the brothers, David Maisels, who died, several actually 2 decades ago. The other brother, Albert, died just recently, but I particularly hit it off with David Maisels, and over lunch, I explained to him that, hey, I'm looking to get into the film business, and he said, well, we would love to do more TV commercials because they're lucrative. So we cooked up a plan where I would come work for them and basically become their executive producer for television commercials, which meant I shopped their reel around to Madison Avenue to get them more advertising work. But I used that 5 year period as my film school and learned everything I could about documentaries. That is also where I met Bruce Sinofsky, who I made a number of my early films with. Bruce also sadly just passed away. And Bruce and I did Brothers Keeper together there while we were, you know, basically Brothers Keeper was a moonlighting operation while we worked. He was an editor and I was their marketing guy. And while we were there, we made Brothers Keeper. And when Brothers Keeper needed to find money to be edited, we got the money from a now defunct PBS program called American Playhouse. And when that funding came through, we left the Maisels and started our own company. And that was kind of the start of my film career. And Brothers Keeper, you know, which was financed on a dozen credit cards and all the money we had in the world at the time. Ultimately, it went to Sundance, won a prize, and kind of that launched our careers.
Wow, that's a great story.
And you know, and the irony of it is, you know, I was never intending to be, you know, a documentarian per se. So now that I'm one of the recognized people in my field, I look back now. Of course, I think everything now. I look back and think everything happens for a reason. And of course, I was destined to do this, and it's been an amazing life adventure to go drop into people's worlds. You know, whether it's a week, a month, or in the case of the West Memphis Three, you know, 20 years. And it's such a privilege to be able to tell these stories. But, you know, when I met the Maisel brothers as a producer on TV commercials, and that kind of launched my entry into the film business, I could have just as easily, you know, at the time, I wasn't looking for documentary production. So I could have just as easily had been part of the team that hired Ridley Scott to shoot a commercial. And if I had hit it off with Ridley Scott, maybe I would have gone off to Hollywood and made a completely different kind of film career. So I just find it very ironic you know, the role of chance and coincidence in one's life. I find you know, very interesting.
You've talked a little bit before about how you got involved with Tony, right? You met him at a party, you guys talked, you hit it off. But had you heard of him before then? And if so, what was your sort of general impression?
You know, interestingly, I actually had gravitated towards some of Tony. Tony has one particular DVD series called Lessons in Mastery that I bought a long time ago. And, you know, I'm not a self-help person, or so I thought, you know, and I'm not a seminar kind of person. I mean, I didn't even know Tony did seminars when I met him. I just had this very superficial perception and misperception of that guy who did all those commercials, the guy on the elevator from Shallow Hal. You know, I of course knew of his public persona, and I knew he did these DVDs. And in fact, I was, you know, I don't normally gravitate towards that kind of thing, but those lessons in mastery, I actually, there have been a couple of times in my life where I've pulled those. I think they were audio cassettes, so that shows you how old it was when I bought those. So I had listened. You know, now that I've met a lot of hardcore Tony Robbins fans, you know, I was not one of those people who, you know, bought every book, every DVD, go to the seminars. But ironically, my only foray into listening to something to help me was that Lessons in Mastery years ago, you know, and a couple of times in my 20s and my 30s, I like in moments of like where I'm trying to figure stuff out, I had pulled those things out. But by the time I had met Tony at this party in 2012, I was well into my current career, and I had forgotten that I even owned those audio cassettes, and so I hadn't been exposed to Tony in a really long time, and I only had the most superficial perception of who he was. And so when we met at this party, we just I was just captivated by his charisma, his warmth, his immediate interest in who I was, and it was. I mean, what brought us together conversationally was he was told that I was the guy who did the Metallica film, and I think he really dug Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, which is, has a connection to this film, of course. The film, Metallica is about a band in crisis, and they hire a therapist, and it's about discovering who you are and the vicissitudes of fame and fortune and not being satisfied, with the role that you're playing. So there's a lot of connections, I think, between, on the one hand, this film is very much a departure from what I'm known for, but I actually think of it as kind of a cousin to the Metallica film. So we just struck up a conversation. He of course is, very charismatic, very interesting. And I think he sensed that something was going on in my life at the time, which we can get into in a minute. We weren't discussing what was going on in my life, but I think he had a sense that there was some, unsettled business, because and I said to him, hey, I actually told him, I have your lessons in mastery audio cassettes, but since the formats have changed, I never updated it. And, I haven't listened to it in a long time, but, and so, we chatted. I said, I didn't know you did seminars, and, but he invited me to one, and I, I went home and I discussed it with my wife. She said, sure, go for it, And as I was getting in the car to go to the airport, as I was getting on the plane to fly to Palm Springs, California, where Date with Destiny was held until they switched to Boca the year that I shot it in 2014. So, the entire time I'm headed out there, I'm wondering, why am I doing this? I'm a super busy guy. If you were to look at my film credits and TV credits on IMDb, you would see, for a 54-year-old person, I have, at the time I was 50, I've done quite a bit. I've worked, I'm a bit of a workaholic. So for me to take 6 days out of my life to go to some seminar that I had never really heard of, and me not being a seminar person, I was surprised. Something was pulling me there, and as I, at each leg of the journey, as I made my way to Palm Springs, I kept wondering, I can't believe I'm doing this, but there was something about Tony that and our conversation that just hit a nerve, and I decided to check it out.
Something pulled you there, and you were there day one, and you mentioned that you had a reaction where you wanted to leave, right?
Right. Well,
But you
yes,
didn't want to insult him because you're sitting up
right.
front.
Right. That's the other half of the story. I get there, I get to Date with Destiny. I realize, Tony is very generous and invites. I wasn't the only person he invited. At any of these events, there are, quite a few people from all walks of life that he's encountered in his recent travels, who he's invited. So I was one of quite a few people that were there as his guest. And one of Tony's people and was, a Date with Destiny staffer is actually assigned to making sure, his people are taken care of. And so I realized I wasn't quite anonymous there, which, at first I felt, oh, very, I felt special. Oh boy, not only has he invited me here, but there's somebody here checking in with me and his other guests, of course. It wasn't exclusively for me, to make sure you're having a good time. So at first I felt, oh, this is, wow, what a thoughtful, nice guy. And of course I still think that, but at the time, I thought, wow, this is really thoughtful and this is great. And so the thing starts, and after the first break, I didn't walk. I ran for the exit doors, and all my red flags were going off. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I have got to get out of here." Obviously, something was touching a raw nerve. I'm a guy who looks through the camera for a reason. I'm an observer of life, or so I thought, not a participant. I the idea of pairing off with a stranger, and starting to reveal kind of innermost thoughts. And, let's face it, there's music and
Touching.
physicality
Yeah.
and hugging,
Uh-huh.
and I don't want to overplay that for people and scare them off. Most of the seminar is not that, but in the first 2 hours, you know, he want, you're getting oriented into this world. And, you know, a big part of what he does is that physical, is remaining active and dancing and jumping. And because that's when the breakthroughs happen, when your energy is at a certain level. So you get much more of it at the beginning because you're just getting introduced to that. So I had no idea what I was stepping into. I had no idea about all the amazing, very content rich stuff that was going to happen over the next 6 days. All I knew is I was in a room with a lot of people, lots of loud music, jumping up and down, hugging a stranger, pairing off with somebody, because you pair off with you find a partner if you haven't come with somebody. And in fact, if you've come with somebody, you're encouraged to, maybe not partner with the person you've come with. So I fled for the exit doors. I mean, again, all of my red flags were going off. I called my wife, Lauren, and I said, "Oh my God, I have got to get out of here. I can't believe that I've signed up for 6 days of this." Tony is very aware that I'm here because there's somebody assigned to his guests. And like, what's my exit strategy here so I don't insult the guy who so nicely invited me here? But I just can't last 6 days. And my wife, bless her heart, said, "Look, you've carved out the time. You rarely take time for yourself like this. You just stick it out. Give it another day before you make any rash decisions." It was great advice, because on day two, there's a guided memory exercise that you see in the film. In the film, it's only about 3 or 4 minutes, and in the actual Date with Destiny, it was more like 40 minutes long. And so I found myself, you know, as Tony takes you back to your earliest childhood memory and encourages you to go to the memory before that you on the surface have forgotten. It's a whole process to kind of release you from the burdens of the things that have held you back. And for me, my childhood was not an easy childhood. And so that's the area that is the sore spot with me. That is the source of a lot of the chains kind of that bind me, or held me back. And so I did that exercise. I opened my eyes after about 40 minutes in a room of 2,500 people. It was the first time when my eyes were shut that I tuned out the rest of the world, and did not think about the fact that I was in a room of this many people. And I was flooded in tears. And I cried like I hadn't cried, that I could ever remember crying that much. And I felt a weight lift. Now, it wasn't like, a light bulb went off and all of a sudden, the angels appear and like my life is now perfect. It
Right.
was just a moment of lightness where I felt, wow, I haven't felt this way in a long time. Something profound happened in that moment. And I thought, wow, if something could make me feel this way, even for a moment, then there's something here, and let me give it a shot. And so it totally changed my attitude for the next 5 days, and I decided to stick it out. And, look, not every program, every aspect of every program is going to resonate. It's not like 100% of the time you feel like, oh, this is for me. But from that point on, I decided to give it a shot. And and other people have different approaches, but for me, I kind of cherry picked lots of amazing moments and amazing philosophical ways of approaching life, And as a result, there are certain tools, and the tools that I absorb are, hopefully will be different than the tools other people absorb, because it's really up to you, which is why the film is called I Am Not Your Guru, because it's really not Tony telling you what to do. It's Tony helping you find your path in whatever way that means for you. By the end of the seminar, I was, you know, I had a transformation. I felt like I took a journey quite reluctantly. I went in kicking and screaming and came out the other end with some real tools and really felt transformed. And that's when I realized I wanted to make a film about it. So I called Tony and I thanked him profusely for the experience. And I said, not only was it, and I told him the whole story I just said here, that, the first 2 hours I wanted to get the hell out, but I stuck it out and it became something I wasn't expecting. And I said, I'd really love to make a film about this. On the most basic level, I wanted to make a film because, the event is inherently cinematic. The interventions that he does, you just feel this energy in the room that I just felt would translate onto the big screen or the little screen in the case of Netflix. And also the other thing I wanted to do with the film that I thought was fascinating is I've never experienced the camaraderie that's in the room. Very quickly, people from all walks of life, the barriers fall there, and it moves from self-interest. Of course, everyone's there to improve their lives, so that's inherently self-interested, and that certainly is a big part of it. But there's also this communal caring and this spirit of connection with one another and this rooting for other people. You see it in the dawn sequence. That room is in my documentary. The room is on their feet in tears, sending this woman love. This woman who went through horrible physical abuse as a child, and she tells that story. And I've just never experienced, a room full of people who just kind of the boundaries fall, and there's this spirit of love and connection, which I thought would be a great thing to bring to the screen. And so I told him, hey, I'd love to make a film. And he was initially resistant because he was concerned that a documentary crew would somehow interfere with the experience of the attendees, which I can understand. He has cameras there, but they kind of hang back, and those cameras are designed to capture images for the Jumbotron so that anyone in that room of 2,500, no matter where Tony is, people can look up on the screen and see the action, just like in a rock concert. It's different when you have an outside crew coming in and, really getting some of the up and close stuff that we got. He was afraid that that would interfere with the attendees' experience. He was also concerned that, it's a 72-hour content-rich experience, and the interventions, for example, in real life can take 2.5 hours, and yet I'm reducing them to a scene in a documentary, which means 7-8 minutes. And the entire film is only 2 hours or less, because that's kind of the, running time of a documentary. So he was, concerned that somehow the condensation of time would trivialize the experience. It wouldn't capture the true essence of, for example, in the interventions, the emotional arc that he takes people through. And those were both legit concerns. And so it took me 2 years to, wear him down and convince him that those concerns would be addressed. And I convinced him about the condensation of time, not to be concerned about that, by sending him my films and saying, look, that is the nature of documentary. All documentaries are hyper reality on a certain level, because unless you're going to actually live the event anything you see a film about, you're trusting the filmmaker to make the right choices to capture the emotional truthfulness of a situation as opposed to the literal truthfulness, meaning the literal truthfulness is the 72 hours, but the 2 hour film will capture the emotional truthfulness. And, I gave the example, look at my Paradise Lost documentaries. That was 6 weeks of murder trial, but you only see about 60 minutes of all of that murder trial in the original documentary, because part of the documentary is behind the scenes and in the town, but there's about an hour of actual trial. And yet that was a 5 or 6 week trial in real life. But nobody questions whether I haven't captured the emotional truthfulness of what went on in that courtroom. So he got that argument as he started to watch more of my films. The other concern about impeding the experience of the viewer, I just originally I wanted to come with, I wanted him to give me the permission to give me a letter, actually, an access letter saying, hey, yes, you can make this film. And then I would go out and raise money for it. And so I felt I couldn't start the film until he gave me, unfettered permission to shoot the event. And finally I said, look, I'll come on my own risk. I won't get another entity involved. Let me come. We'll start shooting the event. And if at any time you feel like the presence of the documentary, my presence, or the crew, is impeding in your attendees' experience, we will, we'll shut it down. You can tell me to go home, and I'll give you the footage to use how you want, but we'll shut the film down. I wasn't giving him permission to control or the content of the movie, which I want to be clear about. I had final cut of the film, but I was giving him permission to say, okay, you know what, this is not working, shut it down. And so once I gave him that safety valve, he finally agreed to let me come in 2014 and shoot.
So, Joe, you told IndieWire earlier this year that the goal was really to share this profound experience that you yourself underwent,
Yeah.
but that this event might not be for everyone. Can you talk a little bit about the range of experiences that are at Date with Destiny?
Yeah, like any event, I think different people get different things out of it. And in fact, one of the things that I found so amazing about the event is the range of people and why they're there. I mean, as you see in the film, there are a number of people there, who are thinking about suicide. And yet there are a number of people there who are, well-known celebrities who are just looking to get to the next level. At my particular Date with Destiny that we shot at, there was Maria Menounos, Derek Huff, other well-known people or successful people who, may not be a household name, but are extremely successful. There are people of all socioeconomic strata. And so everyone's looking for different things. Some people get a lot out of the relationship day. Some people are looking to heal issues from their childhood, which frankly, that was me. So I think there's no one reason to be there, no kind of prototypical person who attends. And I think that's kind of the amazing thing. And I was talking before about the camaraderie in the room. That's what I found so amazing, because there's a group of people who the boundaries fall. There's a feeling of love and connection in the room between people who, like, if you were all at a party, you wouldn't quite understand why all these people are in the same room in another situation, because they're really from all walks of life. They're people you may not necessarily be friends with in other circumstances, and yet there's just a feeling of connection. And that's really what I wanted to bring to the screen. One of the things that people will find interesting about this film, and is potentially a liability, is that I'm a incredibly skeptical person with regard to my filmmaking, and documentary making in general is a skeptical, or can be a skeptical endeavor. And this is a film where I wanted to do something different with the documentary form. Specifically, instead of, one of my pet peeves, I would say, is that documentary, the definition of documentary these days seems to be wrapped up in this idea that documentary has to be an investigative takedown piece of some social ill. Now, I've made many of those films. I've taken on FBI corruption. I've taken on pollution in the Amazon by corporate polluters. I've taken on, prosecutorial misconduct, wrongful conviction. I mean, I've taken on a lot of tough issues, a lot of social ills that need to be addressed. So I'm not knocking that. I've contributed to the trend. And in fact, because of the gutting of print journalism and because of corporate ownership of the news media, a lot of investigative reporting is only being done by documentarians. So, a lot of social issues are only being addressed by documentarians because the blurring of the line between entertainment and news in corporately controlled television networks has made certain stories taboo, like certain stories a network won't touch for fear of offending advertisers. And that's just the reality of the world we live in. So I'm not knocking that kind of documentary, but in many people's minds, documentary has become equated with the investigative takedown piece. And I wanted to do something very different, which is I had an amazing experience at Date with Destiny. I thought it was inherently cinematic, and I wanted to do something a little different with the documentary form, which is to just give people this kind of experience. I liken the film to a concert film, but it's like a concert of human emotion. And I'm not here to critique Tony or his methods, to bring in third-party voices to talk about whether it's bad or good. I'm just here to share the experience, and I hope the viewer gets something out of it. I'm not saying, I didn't make this film so that people go run and sign up for Tony Robbins seminars. If that happens, I think people will get a lot out of it. But I just wanted to share an experience that if the viewer spends the 2-hour running time of the film thinking about the direction of their own life, thinking about how to become more satisfied, how to become more grateful, which is if I had to boil it down to what I got out of Date with Destiny, it was gratitude for the wonderful circumstances of my life, which I had been taking for granted and causing me to be never satisfied. If I had to boil it down, that's what I got out of Date with Destiny. And I just wanted to share that experience with people. And if people spend 2 hours thinking about the direction of their own lives and learning how to become more fulfilled, then I will consider the film a success. And ironically, I think it's very much connected to my previous films of looking at social ills, even though it feels very different in this sense. And that is, I believe and this belief came out of attending the seminar, if more people were more satisfied with their life, if more people felt a love and connection to their fellow human being, if more people felt self-actualized and felt like they had a purpose and a mission in their life, maybe there would be less social ills in the world for us documentarians to point cameras at. Now, that's a little Pollyannish. I don't believe social ills are going to go away, but this was my goal in making the film, was to share a positive experience, and you can make of it what you want. I'm expecting, a wide range of reaction to the film when it comes out. I think for the Tony Robbins fans who have been to the seminars and, are locked in to what Tony's about, I think they're obviously going to love the movie. And I think I probably could have just put Tony's voice against the giant black screen and not shown any picture, and those people would love the film. I think we live in a very cynical society full of people who think they know better, unfortunately. And I think those people, the haters, are going to hate no matter what, because Tony can be polarizing. And I think, as Taylor Swift says, I can't believe I'm quoting Taylor Swift, the haters are going to hate, and I'm not going to please those people, and that's probably 20% of the audience. But the people I'm interested in with this film again, it's not about go take a Tony Robbins seminar, but the people I'm interested in are in the middle, because the Tony fans are going to love it, the haters are going to hate it, but that the people in the middle, like me, who had some, perception of who Tony is, or maybe had no perception, who might come into the film with some predisposition towards thinking that this groupthink mentality is a bad thing, using that word, because I don't think it's groupthink, but that's the word they would use,
Hmm.
or not being sure what to think, but taking a journey just like my journey. I went from, you know, kicking and screaming like, oh, I got to go back in there because I don't want to insult Tony, to having this amazing transformation. And that's the journey I want people to take with this movie, to not being sure what they can get out of it, but by the end of it, if they've related to some of the characters on the screen, if that has allowed people to think about the direction of their own life and to make some positive changes, or to, you know, think about taking the next step, then I think the film will be a success. And that was really my goal. I was a jury member at a big documentary festival in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. It's called IDFA, the International Documentary Festival. Amsterdam. It's actually the largest documentary festival in the world. Very, just it's adored by people around, who love documentaries. And so I was a juror, and the main venue is like a 14 or 16 screen Pathé multiplex. And I arrived late and was leaving early, so I really had to cram in a bunch of films in a short period of time. So I was taking a break after my third really downer film, about some terrible thing, on a day that I was seeing like four or five films. And I was eating a sandwich in the food court of the theater and just kind of looked around at all the screens, and I saw a giant line in front of the campus rape documentary, and a giant line in front of the latest corporate, polluter documentary, and a giant line in front of the latest political scandal documentary. And I almost felt like I was in a New Yorker cartoon, that this is what documentary has become. It's become the negative takedown of some problem. And again, I don't want to knock that kind of film, because I think they're important for all the reasons I said before. But I just wanted to do something positive and share a positive experience, and hope that people get something out of it. And because of that orientation, that I spoke of, that documentaries seem to be more about where's the takedown, where's the dark side. It's been interesting, and it will be interesting when the film actually comes out to see what people write about it. But I'm expecting negative reviews, because I think reviewers and critics are going to want to say, well, where's the dark side of Tony Robbins? Where's the balance? Why haven't you shown the people who had a bad time? I mean, these are actually some comments I've heard from some early reviews. Where's the dark side? Where's the balance? And to me, I think this is an incredibly objective and balanced documentary, because I'm not telling you what to think. I have faithfully recreated, and all of the people who have seen the film, who have gone to Date with Destiny, have marveled at how accurate my portrayal is, despite only being 2 of 72 hours of an event. Um, you know, I'm not telling you what to think about the event. If you have a negative predisposition towards Tony Robbins and you see this film, yeah, it might confirm it. If you have no idea about him, hopefully this will expose you to some new ideas. But some people, it may not be for them. So this film is incredibly objective, because I'm faithfully capturing an event and not telling you what to think about it. Just like in a concert film, a music concert film, the filmmaker, if the drummer in that particular show is not drumming as well as he usually does, or it's the guitar line is not what you you appreciate on the studio album versus the live version, there's not a filmmaker there telling you those things and telling you, oh, that guitar playing is not good, or that drummer, had an affair. It's it's an immersive experiential film where you're free to make your own decision. So it's been interesting, the reaction, because I've now screened it, and I deeply appreciate Netflix very early on supporting the film, and it's great that it's going to be on Netflix, in part because obviously it reaches this global audience, but also it allows you to play the movie back and forth, and if you want to go back to a certain spot, you know, because you want to get something out of it. Netflix in many ways is the perfect venue, so I appreciate how early they got involved in the film and how excited they've been. But the one thing about this film that, you know, seeing it in a big room with a lot of people, as we've done at film festivals, so it's not going to have a traditional theatrical release. It's going to go out on Netflix, and that's great. But having done a number of film festivals and special screenings and seeing the film in a room of 800 people, it's a powerful experience for people. I mean, people have given us standing ovations, flooded in tears, have told me how moved they've been. People who, of course, the fans find it to be a perfect encapsulation of the event. It's the non-fans who have said, I went into the film thinking, oh, I'm going to hate this guy, and coming out the other side, being totally transformed by the viewing experience and wanting to know more. So there's a disconnect between what the people who are watching the film are feeling and what some critics are saying. Like, where's the dark side? Where's, it's like, I'm giving you an event, and I didn't find a dark side, so I'm not going to report on a dark side that for me didn't exist.
Sure. And, it's interesting too because there's plenty of darkness in it. People have been calling it, I think there was a headline, the feel good film.
Yeah,
And it's not a feel good film, right? It's not something you just Netflix and chill with, with your friends. It's definitely
right.
still an emotional investment. So it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction will be when it does come out, right, on Netflix.
Yeah,
And it has this broad audience.
I'm excited to see what people think.
So, just, one more question. Sort of wondering what's next, right? I mean, you mentioned that his events are inherently cinematic, and there could potentially even be, future film or television narratives around this. I think it's just it's fascinating, right? Because people are surprising. And moving forward, these events keep happening. So
Yeah.
I imagine that you yourself, though, are moving on to a different subject. What's your next project on?
Yeah, I've got quite a few things. I mean, I have to say this experience has opened my eyes to wanting to figure out how to, mm, you know, do more on human consciousness and spiritual growth and those kinds of things. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do in that realm. And so for those people who actually know and like my films and are worried that I'm going off in this new direction and not going to go back to my
It's
deeply
okay.
investigative, you know, I jokingly tell people I make feel bad movies,
Yeah, the
because
gritty stuff. Yeah.
I've done films about such horrible subjects, but it's because I want to shine a light on I like to give a voice to the voiceless and shine a light on injustice, and that is something that is a big part of my background and filmmaking background. It's something I will continue. I'm doing a show right now for Discovery on a guy, Richard Glossip, who's on death row, and the state of Oklahoma wants to kill him. Many people think he's innocent, and so I'm trying to, and he's exhausted all of his appeals. So, I'm doing that. I'm doing a film about genocide. So, back to my dark and gloomy subjects. So very busy, and I certainly will continue making the kinds of films that speak to me, which is shining a light on injustice and being part of this very important movement of modern day documentary in this kind of era of corporate ownership of the media, really telling stories that sometimes that kind of media is afraid to tell. But my eyes have definitely been opened to using the documentary form for a different reason, which is to inspire, to look at human growth and development, because I think, as I said before, if we all feel connected to one another, that's another way of attacking many of the problems in the world, is if we feel for one another, if we have empathy for one another. And I think that's what Tony does so brilliantly. At the end of the day, he creates these connections between people, and he allows you to reach, if you want, your better self. And it's not like at the end of the seminar, boom, you're finished. It's again why I call the film I'm Not Your Guru, because it really requires you to continually work on yourself. But I think if we're all working on ourselves and feeling connected to not just one another, but to who you really are, I think that's as an effective way to counter all the problems there are in the world, just as effective as pointing a camera at the problems and saying, "Hey, look at these problems." But so I think I'll be doing both. But I thank Tony for that kind of eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and thank you, Joe. You did a great job with this. And I think everybody listening, tune into Netflix. July 15th, it will be available. It is called Tony Robbins, I Am Not Your Guru. All right. Thanks, Joe.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You can find Joe Berlinger's documentary, Tony Robbins, I Am Not Your Guru, on Netflix starting July 15th. And to learn more about Tony Robbins and Date with Destiny, visit www.tonyrobbins.com/documentary. The Tony Robbins podcast is directed by Tony Robbins and hosted by Anna Yord. Carrie Song is our executive producer. Tyler Culbertson is our associate producer. Jamie Carvajal and Adriel De La Torre are our digital editors. Special thanks to Diane Adcock and Mary Buckheit for their creative review. Copyright Robbins Research International.